Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 8 a.m. and call the meeting in the Madison Metropolitan Sewage District Commission to order. Okay, so here's Ezra. Okay, so we have all commissioners present. And welcome to any of our guests here virtually. Do we have anybody virtually? Nope. And then, Cassie, you want to go? Do you need to go through the virtual? Well, yeah, go through it anyway, in case somebody pops in.
Good morning, Commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. While the Commission and staff are in person, we are still offering a Zoom option so members of the public can attend. If you're attending virtually and would like to speak, you can do so during appearances by the public. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, and the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. Finally, Commissioners, please use your microphones while speaking and make sure your voice is directed towards the mic. When you are not speaking, please ensure your mic is off so others can utilize the mics. As a reminder, only 3 of the table mics can be live at a time. Also, please state your name before speaking for those who may be joining us via Zoom. Those are the decorum rules of the District Commission. Thank you for following them, and let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Any announcements? No announcements? Any appearances by the public? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have the consent calendar. We have the minutes of April 16th meeting, cash statement operating fund, approval expedited boundary agreement in Sugar Maple Lane and Watts Road, right away, City of Madison, and then review and approval of sewer extension plans, all in City of Madison. So, do we have a motion to approve or any questions first?
I have a question. Last time I had a question about the city treasurer signing the cash report.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get back to us at this time.
So what was the finding?
Yes, so under the statutes, the city treasurer is the treasurer for the district, so that's really the underlying principle for that. Yes, I think that is part of the. I'm not sure if I think he does sign it. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry, wasn't aware whether he signed it or not. He doesn't have to sign it. He's the manager of the accounts.
Okay, do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
Approved.
Motion by Commissioner Lunkella.
Murphy, I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Murphy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay, then we move to acceptance of the district strategic plan. They were going to put this on consent, but I suggested we move it to topics, though we didn't have any discussion because I thought it would be best it was approved by vote. So anybody have any comments? For Eric, you lead off?
Yeah, I'll lead it off. Eric Dundee, Executive Director. So just put a few slides together here for you today for acceptance of the strategic plan. So in your packet and then on the screen will be the strategic plan as we discussed last meeting with no changes. The notes are the next steps. So if Cassie will go one more. So the plan would be we would accept the strategic plan at this meeting, and then May 14th we will discuss the commission reporting schedule, which we'll talk about in the Executive Director report coming up. And then May 28th we would bring the commission 3-year plan. So those would be the formal actions that we'd be looking to do in the future. But we also have 2 remaining work plan topics from this. One is on organizational excellence that Commissioner Bookland talked about, and the other is about sustainability in that topic. Those are not part of the specific strategic plan next steps, but just noting those for the Commission that those are 2 topics that are ancillary.
Commissioner Brooklyn, I'll move to approve the strategic plan.
Motion by Commissioner.
Second, Meyer.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Here to give a overview of our final permit that we recently received. So, oops, wrong direction. Cassie, help me. Thank you. Think I figured this out by now, but Marty Griffin, Ecosystem Services Manager for the district. Just a little bit of background for the district for those who are unfamiliar. We serve a lot of people, almost 435,000 people, 24 communities, 14 billion gallons of water every year we recycle, 37 million gallons of biosolids, round the clock, 365. That's some scope, so you understand the scope of our permit. Why do we have a permit? It's a requirement for Clean Water Act. Our permit allows us to discharge to public waters. It's issued by the state DNR, but it's oversight by EPA. So we don't get to create our own permit. State regulators do that for us. And that's to make sure we comply with the Clean Water Act and also state laws. But most importantly, it protects water quality. Specifically, some of the items in our permit generally govern how we recycle our biosolids, our land application program, our whole industrial pre-treatment program is governed by our permit, and then also, as I mentioned, the quality of the water that goes into Badfish Creek. So where are we at with our permit? We actually received our permit on April 6th with an effective date of May 1st. So our permit goes into effect on May 1st. So what's new in the permit? As I mentioned before when I gave a summary of the draft permit, there's sort of two buckets of updates. One that comes because of statewide rule changes that need to be put in the permits. The other bucket is district-specific updates that are specific to the districts receiving waters. So very quickly, some of the things required by state law. We are part of the Rock River Total Maximum Daily Load, which means that we have specific requirements under state law that ramp down our total suspended solid limits because we're part of that TMDL. So that's a state code requirement, and that happened to us in this particular permit. So our TSS limit is now lower than the previous permit, and we'll meet that with our adaptive management because our adaptive management program is how we're meeting the Rock River TMDL legal requirements. The other items that were changed was our bacteria, changing from F. coli to E. coli. That was a code requirement. That's basically a change in bacteria to be more consistent with EPA and environmental monitoring. And then the other item is biochemical oxygen demand. Our previous permit, we looked at carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demand, CBOD. We're now switching to regular BOD. And again, that's a code change that predicated that. And then the last thing that we're all familiar with is PFAS. There was a surface water standard promulgated a few years ago, and that is now officially in our permit as a surface water standard. So we do have limits in the code for PFAS, and our permit dictates some of the steps that the district is taking for utilities to deal with that. The other bucket is changes that are specific to the district's permit, that are specific to our receiving water and our operations here at the district. So the first one that we're probably all familiar with is our outfall consolidation. So our previous permit, we had two outfalls authorized, one at Badger Mill Creek, one at Badfish Creek. Our new permit only authorizes one discharge point, and that's at Badfish Creek. Our phosphorus limit, again, has been ratcheted down, and that is because of the Rock River TMDL. And that is a change that's happening that we're, again, dealing with our adaptive management program to meet our phosphorus limits. Our adaptive management plan that helps us meet our phosphorus limits has to be renewed and updated every permit term. And so our adaptive management plan was approved and updated for this permit term, so we do have an officially approved adaptive management plan with updates to make sure we're continuing to meet our goals to meet our phosphorus compliance. This permit also has two variances. Variances are ways that EPA and the state DNR allow flexibility in time to meet specific surface water standards. So our previous permit, we had two variances, one for mercury and one for chloride. And we did get some changes to those variances in our final permit. The first change is related to our mercury variance. Our historic program, a pollution prevention program, to look at mercury sources and reduce mercury coming into the plant, which influences how much mercury is leaving the plant, has been a tremendous success. So much, in fact, that based on the code calculations to ascertain if you have the reasonable potential to actually exceed the surface water standard for mercury, they did the calculation for us, and it looked like we don't have the potential to exceed because we've been doing so good with our data leading up to this point. So what that means is we no longer have a mercury variance, the water quality standard in our permit, and we actually don't even have a mercury limit because we're expected that our operations are meeting that limit. But what that means is we still have a requirement to do pollution minimization to ensure that we keep our mercury levels low. That means we also have to continue sampling for mercury and monitoring for mercury to ensure that that status stays the same. And then our next permit term, the DNR will look at our data and see how good we're doing, and we'll see what happens next. So it's great news, sort of the success of a lot of hard work by a lot of different people over time get us to this point, right? So I'd like to celebrate that a little bit. The second variance we have is for chloride. Our previous permit did have a chloride variance. Our new permit also keeps our chloride variance. There's a couple changes to the chloride variance. Our previous permit had two variance limits, one for the summer and one for the winter. Our new permit only has one chloride variance that applies all year round. The last two you see on the screen here, whole effluent toxicity, which is our wet testing you might hear it referred to. Those limits have been changed. They are now lower than our previous permit. That has to do with the calculation that DNR does for our in-stream waste concentration. And the last item, PFAS, I mentioned that earlier about things that are required based on state law changes, but there's something specific in the district's permit around PFAS that I wanted to call out, and that is because of the district's foresight into doing PFAS testing since 2021, we actually had a data set we could present to DNR, and there's a requirement in the code for the step sort of way DNR administers PFAS limits, which says we'll collect some data, look at it, and you may be triggered into a pollution minimization plan process. The district, because we already had data, the DNR was able to look at that and make a predetermination that we don't even need a pollution minimization plan for PFAS. And so that requirement was not put in our permit that you typically would see in other utilities. We still have monitoring requirements for PFAS compounds, so we still will have to do that, but the monitoring results will not trigger a pollution minimization plan, and that's because of the information we had collected over the past few years that will help us get that sort of a special determination in our permit. So good thinking on our part early on. All right, so next steps. So we got our permit. It's effective May 1st, which means our first discharge monitoring report is due in June with our new permit requirements. So we're actively right now getting ready for that report, and so a lot of hard work is going into getting ready to meet those new permit requirements. Our next whole effluent toxicity test will be fourth quarter of 2026, so that's starting our new permit schedule for wet testing. And then I also just put up here next steps that all permit decisions can be challenged by anyone impacted by the permit, and that deadline is June 5th. So we won't know until after June 5th if actually our permit's going to stay as is for the permit term, or if there's a challenge that occurs, it may alter which particular permit requirements are in place or not in place. So we're planning on having our reports ready and presuming that all requirements will be in place until we hear otherwise. So with that, I'll end and take any questions if there are.
Thank you. That was good to know. And congratulations on the mercury. That's really great news. And I'm just wondering, with the success of the mercury project and the permitting, could we apply some of that toward PFAS? I mean, are there any contributors industrial contributors to PFAS? I know it's ubiquitous and it's in everything, but are there any point sources that we could identify like we did for mercury and work with them? That's one question. And then a second question, could you explain a little bit more about the wet toxicity test and the changes to that?
Great questions, Mr. Bookman. So the first question, point sources for PFAS. So the answer is kind of yes and no. So we do know probable and potential sources of PFAS. Our district PFAS action plan identifies what some of those are. The most potential are industrial. Our first sort of screening showed we had no sort of manufacturers of PFAS, but our next level of do you use it, do you know, we're sort of in that process of information gathering. But for other potential probable sources, we're using our industrial program, our authorities to sort of monitor and keep track of that. So we are using that lever currently. The reason why I say yes and no is because based on the levels of PFAS we're seeing in our data and the makeup of our service area, even though we know there's potential sources, it may not actually make an impact to what we're seeing with our influent effluent. And that's because we're pretty domestically dominated, and a lot of our PFAS is going to be from just ubiquitous use out there that you really can't pull a lever on, right? So I'll stop that answer there. Your question about the whole effluent toxicity testing. So I mentioned in-stream waste concentration. And so what that is a determination of how much influence the district's effluent has on the receiving stream. So they use it based on percent influence. And so our previous permit ascertained that we only were about 93% of the influence on the stream at the point where the effluent enters in Badfish Creek. And so that determination then triggers and goes into other calculations. That one of those is the whole effluent toxicity testing limit. This new permit, the DNR redid that assessment and determined that we are now 100% influence of the stream, which then influenced that whole effluent toxicity testing. If we're more influence of the stream, that means they wanted to ratchet down the toxicity test to make sure we're still protective of the biota in the stream, right? So that was sort of the process and the reason why we got a lower limit.
We are 100% of what of the stream?
100% influencing the impact of the stream. So the DNR is basically saying that the point where our effluent enters the stream, that impact is due to all of our effluent. There is no sort of other natural influences coming at that point. Whereas
Really?
Before, they would be saying there was about a 7%
Right, there's 93.
other natural influences there.
Yeah,
So we're not 100% contributing to whatever impacts you're seeing.
And they calculate that how?
Well, I don't know exactly how they calculate that percentage influence. I'd have to go back and look at the water quality-based effluent limit memos that they provided to us, but we can more detail on that later if you need that.
Beth?
So how does that change the wet toxicity limit that we are now held to in the permit? And do we expect to be able to meet that?
So I guess, again, I have to go look at the actual calculation to know how the in-stream waste concentration percentage influences the toxicity limit calculation. As to your second question, will we have an impact? I mean, if you look at our past data and extrapolate that into the future, which is not something I like to do because we can't predict the future, but if you do that, we would definitely have had times where we're either right at that limit or potentially exceeding it.
So what can we do about that? Anything?
Right now, we're going to try to meet our permit, and I think we have a closed session later to talk about potential other options for dealing with the permit. So,
Greg?
This is just a esoteric chemistry question I can't resist, and it's really for Beth and you, Marty. So the change from CBOD to BOD, I'm just intellectually curious why they made that change and if it really affects us in any way.
I'll be on record to say I'm not a chemist. So chemists on the call, please apologize in advance if I screw things up. The reason for the change is there was a code change, and they think that the DNR thinks that looking at biological oxygen demand is is more protective than looking at carbonaceous biological oxygen demand. I'm not going to get into the reasons why they think that. I can point to our particular effluent, and the reason why we like the carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demand is because it accounts for other factors that may be sucking the oxygen out of the water, like nitrogen fixation or things like that, right? So if you just look at carbonaceous biological oxygen demand, it lets you account for that nitrogen. If you just look at biochemical oxygen demand, it doesn't really look at those other factors. So there could be a difference in those numbers, but when you look at meeting limits, we have no problem with that. It's just sort of what the chemistry is and what's influencing your result. So that's about as much as I can give you.
We could still test CBOD.
Yes, actually we will. And actually in our permit, it allows us to do that for influent, not for effluent.
Okay, Ezra.
I wanted to ask maybe a similar line of thinking to where Beth was coming from, but about chloride. So I know later on we'll have an operations report from Alan. We know kind of how we tickle those numbers at different times, and you said we're now going to be, I'm assuming, you didn't have numbers in here, but held to a lower number all year round, and not a higher number in winter like we had been before. So what does that mean? Are we going to be really tight on being able to meet that? You know, how operationally sort of, how scared are we, you know, that these numbers are going to be difficult for us to meet going forward?
Again, I'll say that I don't like predicting the future. You're correct. Our annual variance limit for chloride is lower than either of our seasonal limits we had in our previous permit. Again, if you look at past data and extrapolate into the future, which is dangerous, I will go on record saying that, we definitely will have times where we would be over our current variance limit in our new permit. How are we going to deal with that? Same way we always deal with chloride. We have a pollution minimization plan, group of great staff, and we have a lot of levers that we're going to be pulling, and we have a lot of potential to continue working on that and keeping those levels down. The reason why I don't like predicting the future for chloride is because there's influences for chloride that sometimes are out of our control, and it's hard to know what those will be to say how that's going to influence us meeting our permit. But for the things we can control, we're going to be continuing doing that and doing a good job of that. So I feel confident, but that's me.
Thanks, Marty. That helps.
Is that measured monthly, or you said it's an annual number, but do they measure it every month? Can you fail, or does it only fail once?
It's a weekly average per month. So weekly average of 52. It's a weekly average, so we'll look at the weekly average and you ascertain that to the limit to determine if you fail or not. Okay.
Probably less esoteric, or maybe more esoteric. Commissioner Lytle, sorry. I know both Commissioner Bookland and Commissioner Meyer have brought up how proud we are of some of the proactive steps the district's taken around mercury, around PFAS, and it seems like this is a demonstration of the benefits that being proactive about some of those things achieves for the district in terms of the permit that may not have been regulatorily driven previously. I just think the opportunity to kind of look at potential long-term cost savings around having this in the permit the way it is versus had we been completely reactive with some of those things, worth looking at when we're trying to make the case for other, you know, emerging contaminants and investing in studying those early versus waiting for a permit change to do it. So hopefully just something to keep in mind when we're investing in pollution prevention or emerging contaminants, that, you know, there are real downstream, no pun intended, benefits to making those investigations early and getting on a proactive stance. Congratulations.
Appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Oh, seeing none, thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the Force Main Condition Assessment Program. Jen Hurlbus.
Good morning, Commission. My name is Jen Hurlbus, and I am the Director of Planning and Engineering at the district. And this topic is coming from some of the questions that came up when we added the pump station to Force Main follow-up investigation from that issue last August. So to just start, why are we doing Force Main Condition Assessment? This is relatively new for the district and for our industry. The technology is still rapidly evolving to do these assessments. Gravity mains, that has been a more what you've traditionally thought of when we're talking about condition assessment for pipes, and that is very different than force mains. So the graphic, the red pipes are our force mains, the blue pipes are gravity mains. So for the district, we have 50 miles of force main within our collection system. Some of that, or most of that, is what we is coming to convey to the plant. But we have two effluent force mains. That Badfish Creek effluent force main is the discharge point now. That is over 5 miles for out of that. So the why this program has become more critical to really start is that we have had 5 force main failures within the last 5 years. I think we only had one, and that was a contractor drilling into a force main, so not a condition-related failure. That was prior to this time frame. And so what we're really going to try to explain is that this program is a big undertaking. These are harder to do. They're more costly. There's challenges with them. There's some differences in available technology, so it's not just a consistent standard process. And just it does cost a lot more for this type of a program. So a little background. We had a consultant that performed a overall force main condition assessment program plan that was delivered in 2017. And so since that, we have done some assessments. Pump Station 6 force main and both of the Pump Station 7 force mains were completed in 2019. Those were primarily concrete pipe, so it was a smart ball assessment, which we'll talk about later too. And then we did portions of the Pump Station 16 force main in 2022. That work is trying to plan and understand better for the Pump Station 16 rehab project and force main that has been in the CIP for the last couple of years. And we will be completing Pump Station 10 force main this either late summer or fall. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in more detail to explain. And then, as I mentioned, we have had some emergency repairs or other issues in the past 5 years. So you remember Pump Station 7 force main had a failure at the belt line. There again, there may have been some external factors to that failure. And then we noticed a leak at our Pump Station 10 inside the station at the wall. So we've been keeping an eye on that one. That's a pre-stressed cylinder concrete pipe. And that's where this assessment that we're going to be doing soon is coming out of. And then we had 2 ductile iron force main failures between 23 and 25, Pump Station 15 and Pump Station 2 force main. So when we're thinking about an overall assessment program, there's kind of 4 areas, and these are kind of, depending on where we're at with each force main, they could be in any part of these areas. So, first we're looking like that plan did in 2017, 17, and we're continuously looking at that, trying to understand, what data do we have? What is the priority, right? That plan identified the highest priority force mains. We reevaluated that in 2023 after some of these other failures of occurring, and reprioritized based on more information that we had. And then we plan, right? Are these things getting programmed into our CIP? Because these are larger projects. These are not just your routine maintenance type projects. So then assessment. So like a force main inspection that's coming up, right? We're going to complete the inspection. We're going to get data, and we're going to get that analysis done. The key part is that we're going to add now with this next force main that we have not done previously in the assessments is a risk evaluation. So this is a more complicated analysis, especially with force mains, and with very little data to compare. That's been kind of the problem, and why this is still an emerging thing in our industry. We just don't have enough data to compare of really how do we determine if that failure or what's the kind of remaining useful life on that pipe. There's not enough information, and there haven't been enough failures. And then when we find something, we're going to address it. So that's that risk mitigation. Are there steps that we can take to, either mitigate that risk? Do we need to do some remediation, point repair versus like full replacement? It's going to be more cost effective. So those are some of the strategies that need to go into this. And then manage. Then this becomes part of our program, is that we need to program this in. We need to be monitoring this. We need to be reviewing the information as we get more. Part of asset management, and then also capital planning. Just want to note that that's where we need to be continuously trying to program these in. So just kind of an overview, right? There's lots of things that can impact a pipe failure. It's not just age. I think that's often been kind of the thinking, is that, well, we were told the pipe has a certain amount of useful life, right? Well, that's what we would expect. So we can, just expect that we need to replace it after it's so old. We learned a hard lesson this last August with Pump Station 2 force main. Only a 20-year-old pipe. What happened? Well, lots of things. There's corrosion that can be happening, either from the internal or the external corrosion. Were there design and construction practices that were not, that at the time wasn't something that we thought would cause a problem, and that now we have found, based on numerous failures that have happened across the industry, that might be something, that, having that wrap around the pipe to protect it. Well, how hard is that to do and keep it tight? And, we found that, construction practices can really impact that if it's not done. You don't have the right bedding material that's going to support the pipe when it starts losing some of that soil structure, or has a leak, and those fines move away, like we've seen in some other cases too. So there's a lot of things that can impact the pipe. And material is also one that we're seeing with force mains. So depending on the type of material, it's going to have different failures. So if you look at district force mains by material, over 80% fall into two categories. Pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe is 36% in the orange, and the green is ductile iron pipe, 47%. So what we're looking for, though, in those two, it's different. So a failure mode for a pre-stressed cylinder concrete pipe, it's concrete, but it has a steel cage, like a wire wrap, inside that concrete. So if then that concrete deteriorates, and then you get that corrosion, or that rebar is exposed, or the steel is exposed to that, then that's what corrodes. If something breaks in there, that loses the strength of the pipe. So you're looking for that. In a ductile iron pipe, the strength of the pipe is the actual ductile iron, so that wall thickness. So you're looking for loss. If you start getting a certain amount of loss, then it can't maintain the pressure, or the pressure, if you have a higher pressure in the pipe, then that's what can cause that bust out, that failure, where there was that thin spot in the wall. So I like to just walk through examples. It's a lot easier for me to talk about that. So this Pump Station 10 force main condition assessment, we contracted this work in 2024. When we got into the planning for it, we ran into a problem of not being able to isolate the flow. So we already had a project planned for doing some valve work at the station, so we just delayed the inspection to get that valve work done. Had a long lead time with a valve. The valve is coming, I think, this week or next week, and so that work will be done in end of July, and then we can do this inspection. So a little background. So this pipe, it starts pump station 10. Might be a little hard. It's kind of near Milwaukee Street, just north of Milwaukee Street and Highway 51, and then the yellow highlighted line kind of follows just right along Highway 51 and discharges to gravity around Buckeye Road. That helps kind of get your bearings there. Installed in 1964, it's 36-inch in diameter. It's around 2 miles long. We did replace the last 1,900 feet in 2015 with, it was swage lining. We hadn't done that, where you basically insert HDPE pipe inside the old pipe. So that project was done previously, and that was for suspecting, just based on the profile, where there might be more corrosion due to gas. And to note, the average daily flow, this is our second largest by volume station. 9 MGD goes through this station every day. So a lot of work goes into preparing for these assessments. And one of the things is the tools are going to travel down the force main, and they need to be gathering data, and they need to know where the tool is. So the pins, if you can see those along the line, are proposed tracking locations. So try to get them about every 500 feet is kind of the rule of thumb, at least for the technology that we're using in this case. So we have a couple of spots where there's, say, an air release valve, something like that, where we can get access to the pipe. So the bottom pictures are kind of showing that, where you can install a sensor directly on the pipe or maybe on a part of that valve, and they can use that. So that's relatively easy location to track. What's harder is when you don't have some of those structures, then the top kind of graphic is showing doing a pothole down to the pipe with a PVC, trying to install that sensor down there, and then run that cable up and monitor that. So there can be, a lot of work and setup of just trying to make sure that we're getting those locations to actually be able to capture the data. So then there's two parts to the assessment. The first part, and we have done this before on the 6 and 7 force mains, is run what the technology is called Smart Ball. So it's using acoustic technology to look for air pockets and leaks in the force main. And so it's a tiny little ball with a foam little protecting ball around it, and it will roll in some way, just along the force main. What's challenging about this is that it needs to move at a very consistent speed of 2 feet per second. So at 2 feet per second for 2 miles, you're talking about at least 2 hours, and they need the flow to stay consistent and not stop. A lot of our pump stations and force mains, the pumps may run for, say, 30 minutes, and then they turn off because they don't have enough volume. In this case, we think we have enough volume. Usually after 10 a.m., the pumps don't turn off. They maintain the wet well levels, so I think we're good there. But it's discharging at, say, 11, or it discharges around 11 MGD. They want us to get it down to 9. We're already running the pumps at like 65% speed. So we're still kind of working on logistics, and we want to test and make sure that we can maintain the proper flow conditions to get the data that we need for this. Because it's a fairly small ball, the check valve is going to be the method for insertion for this. But you still have to then make sure you're closing valves and isolating flow so that we can safely remove the top of that check valve lid, insert the ball, seal everything back up, and then use the pumps to advance. The second part, which is critical, to find those wire breaks. It's a technology called the pipe diver. And so they kind of call it this long snake. You can see on the left diagram. It's 10 or 12 feet long, and it's kind of got expanding fans that have the sensors. So it's using electromagnetic technology, and it's generating a current into that wire wrap so it can see if the variations are happening in the magnetic field. So it's looking for anomalies, things that, you know, kind of all of a sudden just doesn't make sense. Is that signal getting lost? And so this is the one that's the most complicated. So we needed, the plan was, there's a blind flange, a pipe that we could remove, and, you know, after you've dewatered, and then you can remove the blind flange, insert the tool, put it, seal it back up, but then you need bypass pumping behind it to push it past a certain point, and then you can use the pumps to advance it. Well, the problem is the one 16-inch valve, kind of in the bottom right, would not operate. It would not close. So we couldn't, if we can't close that, then we can't get the water drained back in order to insert the tool. So that's what we've been waiting for, is to replace that valve. The other option was we could invest a whole lot of money in temporary bypassing setup and all of that, but we chose not to do that because we already needed valve work done in the station. We have then designed some extra piping, temporary piping that we would need, and that project needs for installing an isolation valve. And we're going to leave that piping in place to create a quick disconnect, so that we can then in the future, if there's an emergency situation, we can do bypass pumping much easier from outside the station. So as I mentioned, I think the real key now and what we've learned from the past is that we need to ask for more specific deliverables on these assessments. So we will get a data and a report on what do we have broken wire wraps, what's the structural consequence of that. The extra items that we're asking for is a finite element analysis-based pipe performance evaluation and a remaining useful life evaluation. So Xylem, the company that's doing this with Pipe Diver, they have now 20 years worth of data. They have the most extensive database on this type of condition assessments. So they will be looking at that and analyzing that data and providing us that kind of more risk-based evaluation that can help us make choices. And what we're really trying to do, right, is if we have some areas that are seeing some corrosion, then we can plan and we can fix those areas. We had explored a project about creating more redundancy for this station, but to build an entire force main, an entire redundant force main, replace the entire force main, you're talking, you know, $13 to $20 million. And so spending $500,000 on an assessment to really understand, are we dealing with the whole force main, or are we just dealing with maybe, you know, a 30-foot stretch? And so to just wrap up here, I wanted to just let you know that what we have planned in the capital improvements plan for the next 6 years. So the 10 force main will be this fall, and then the pump station 2 force main is being added to the list, likely in 27. In 28, we're targeting to do pump station 15 force main assessment. There's also valve work that needs to be done before that assessment could be completed. And then the really big one, high priority for us, is the Badfish Creek effluent force main. That's 54-inch and over 5 miles long. So that anticipated it will take a lot more planning and effort for that one. And then also the pump station 8 force main is on the list. So any questions?
Anybody have any questions? I had some too. Go ahead, Greg. Probably.
Okay, Commissioner Free, so I have lots of questions, but the big one, Jen, is So, I'm sure you've talked to your peers about this, right? And so where are we in comparison to the world here, right? You know, is everybody else in the same boat as us, Green Bay, Milwaukee? Are they doing a preventative maintenance plan for this stuff?
I have not heard of too much from Milwaukee and Green Bay in regards to force main condition assessments. What I will say is what I've seen is that most find the instances of I've heard from inspections is it's after the fact, after they've had a problem, they've had a break, or they've had multiple breaks. And then they go, okay, well, we better look at the whole force main and try to figure out, like, are we anticipating more? Because they're starting to make decisions of, are we replacing the whole thing, or are we continuing to basically just do spot repairs?
So as I think about this from an engineering perspective, right, the two types of pipes that you have, so for the rest of the world here, right, we line pipes all the time. All of the city of Madison's pipes, or at least 95% of them, are gravity main. So the primary load on them is a compression force. So as long as your pipe is in relatively good condition, you can line it with any number of practices, and they actually add strength to the pipe, so the compression forces can be reinforced. As long as there's almost any pipe left, reinforce that. If you think about what they put in the ground for standard sanitary, which is about 10, 11 feet deep, it's a SDR, it's a Schedule 35, 8-inch sanitary pipe that has a wall thickness of less than a half. So it's not, the loading that we're talking about is not significant. What you're talking about, though, is significant, and it's tensile strength, right? So it's a different thing. So you have to catch, you can line either of these pipes. Water utility lines their pipes, but you have to catch it while there's enough steel left. So so you're going to get data back from them. Is the data robust enough or detailed enough that you can make a point repair decision versus I better line this whole pipe? I'm just really curious what level of accuracy they can provide you with that, especially with magnetic. It's a little easier, I think, on the cast iron, but with the ductile iron. With the magnetic, I'm really curious what kind of data they can.
I am too. Haven't seen it yet. We asked, basically they, I think in their proposal, right, they showed kind of some examples of things that they've provided for other, I would say, within 10 feet probably of, they're going to notice an anomaly. Then it's you're going to follow up. You're probably going to need to dig down and look at the pipe and then perform other tests and more, you take a coupon sample and to see what's going on. Do you, so it's used as an assessment to give you an area of kind of narrowing the range of where do you need to look and follow up with even more detailed investigation is my understanding.
Interesting. Okay, so it narrows the scope of the problem, but so it takes it from 50,000 feet to 5,000 feet, but it does not give you an answer. There's more work required.
Yes, and that's why, but for most municipalities, especially with smaller pipe and maybe not such long pipe, the cost to do this type of investigation and inspection usually is about the same or maybe more than maybe the cost of even just replacing the pipe. So that's why also this isn't necessarily a common practice in our industry, but because we have the larger pipe and more expensive, for us, kind of a rule of thumb that I've gotten kind of out of the firms that I've talked to is if your investigation is less than 25% of the total cost of replacement, it's worth doing. But if it's more than that, you're probably just going to decide to just replace it.
I get a question on that, and Beth had a question, but I'll have more after Beth. But how do they decide at the 25% cost of replacement? Is that just a rule of thumb they came up with, or?
Yeah, I mean,
It still seems like a lot of money.
I dragged them out, right? Yeah, well, for, like, in this case, for Pump Station 10, we were trying to decide, do we go forth with, doing a new force main between Pump Station 10 and 6 as, and that was at the lowest cost alternative was, I think, $13.5 million. And we weren't sure, in that decision, and without really knowing, you know, how much of a risk do we have with the 10 force main? Do we need to have, you know, redundancy or, resilience? And so we felt that this then was low cost for getting that type of information to make a better capital, project decision.
Seems to me that 25% still is a quarter of the cost. You know, that, but, and I don't, yeah. Anyway, Beth?
As a non-engineer, I do have a couple of questions, just out of curiosity. One is around, your assessment. And have you ever considered, using a tracer compound, like a dye or something, to, you know, look at, you know, leaks and flows? And I'm just thinking from a medical perspective, you know, and you go in for artery tests, they use tracers and stuff like that. So just, would something like that be applicable? I don't know. It might be a really dumb question.
Well, because force mains, you know, it's pressure, it's full.
Mhm.
The flow is, you know, completely full. So that's where, like, the camera doesn't really work. You can't really see when it's completely in water. And we're trying to do this without, you know, along that whole corridor, you wouldn't really, I mean, where would you see the dye? There's no access points. It's, you know, it's in ground.
Could
so,
you measure volume, like or concentration, I guess, of the dye, like along? For example, if you saw a decrease in concentration or amount at a certain spot, would that tell you you're losing some of it? I don't know.
I guess
just
so.
asking.
Also with the leaks with force mains, usually if there is a leak, you kind of know. Just like the two force main, because you're all of a, you know, it comes up, right? You know, it creates another problem. You're gonna know. It's more of, we're looking for what would cause other failures in that pipe and the corrosion. So in this case, usually leaks is kind of, it's either, you already either know and it's already happened, or, you know, it's either so minor or you probably wouldn't even notice it, especially in a volume calculation, like with 9 million gallons. Because most of the flow is still going to make it. That's what we saw too in the two force main, right? It was, you know, 96% of the flow still made it here, even with the leak. So.
Okay. And then just a second kind of a question is, the materials, the ductile iron and the concrete are rigid materials. Are there new potential materials for pipes that wouldn't be so rigid, so that they would give a little bit to some of the compression and some of the changes in temperature, so that, you know, they would be a little bit more flexible, so you wouldn't get that breakage? Or I don't know, but I'm just curious, are there new things coming out that?
So the most recent force mains that we've installed, like Pump Station 17, is pressure rated PVC.
That might be something to consider for replacing some of these, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have been using different pipe materials, yes.
Okay, so can you line them with the fiberglass liners in that? Or Greg said there's several different ways to line force mains, or is it usually a full?
Been told you can. I still have some doubts and questions on some of the bends and other issues. You know, and then even that, right, you need access. So like we lined underneath the belt line, and that was, you know, you had to create large, you know, pits receiving and launching on either side, and then you know, basically replace those sections of pipe too. So, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a combination in some cases for rehab.
Yeah, you have to dig down anyway.
Mhm.
It's certain, I don't know how many feet. Okay, so when was the last, force main we put in? Was it the one over there? For, 18?
No, we just, completed, the pump station 17, force main relief last year.
That's new construction, but it
New
serves
construction.
an existing area.
It'll be a parallel system, yep,
Parallel.
serving an existing.
Okay, so
Mhm.
Greg put his engineer hat on, I'm gonna put my planner hat on. And my planning hat says we have to try to find a way to minimize force mains. Because I know you talked about the new material of, the one you just mentioned to Beth, PVC pipe.
Mhm.
But, you know, they could say, that we may say that today is fine, that's probably the same thing they said 30 or 40 years ago about the concrete pipe, the ductile iron pipe, oh, this is best.
Mhm.
So, you know, hearing that always makes me, oh, we're gonna have a problem. We always think newer is better, and we found that out, sometimes it isn't, but maybe sometimes it is. But if putting in the planner hat, it makes me think we ought to really limit new force mains to serve new areas of the, if the people want force mains, it should really be owned by the local community rather than us. If we're gonna be doing something like that, then we probably should have some kind of upcharge or something, because of the expenses that we're gonna face in the future, of the difficulty of redoing the pipe or fixing issues. So that's just something to think about, that, you know, from a planning side. But it brings me back to 1990, when we had a snowstorm, blizzard. We had 18 inches of snow, and I was rewriting our, land division code. Pardon me? Yeah, December 1st or 2nd, right. I was rewriting our land division code, and then the nice thing about working in a small community, you saw everybody. So I saw the superintendent for the highway department, how are things going? Well, it's taking an hour or more to clean out every cul-de-sac. And they basically ended up having to take the front end loader down to each cul-de-sac to clean it out. And then you got calls because of the large snow piles in people's yards. But at that point, rewriting the land, we limited the number of cul-de-sacs you could have in any subdivision, one for every 50 lots. And, that helped solve a problem. And so, you know, we have to try to think of ways to solve problems before they become problems. And so, hearing the force main, you know, we're always gonna have sewer mains, and that's a good thing, but force mains causes problems, they're energy users too, you know, we're always, I don't know how much energy a pump station uses or average, but probably quite a bit. So that's just kind of my 2 cents. I was gonna have the question if we had newer materials or anything like that, and I thought that, but, and one other question I have, you know, you got the concrete pipe and it's got that, I call it that fencing material in it,
Mhm.
you know, basically.
Cage, I kind of call it a cage.
Yeah, it looks like a fence.
Mhm.
If one thing starts to break, and, you know, one of those things, is it catastrophic where it starts going down the line? Second one breaks, the third one breaks, you know, over time, or can it suffice with one breakage, you know?
It's a coil that, yes,
Yeah.
it's basically that kind of compression or tensile
Right.
strength. And so, yeah, if you have a break, it's like the whole
thing
stick
starts
is,
to pop.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay,
All right,
thank you. That will take us to, update on the bathroom at the Madison Public Market.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Commissioners. I'm excited to be back and share updates on this project with you, which is nearing completion. I'm Catherine Harris, a pollution prevention specialist here. The project, of course, that I'm here to talk to you about today is transformation of the bathrooms at the Madison Public Market. The goal here is taking the spaces from functional blank slates of simply using the bathroom to creating places that spark curiosity, stimulate dialogue, educate our community, and maybe even entertain. The project as a whole is an investment in our community, actively building an informed and aware population that has appreciation for our sewer systems, and that people who are increasingly more and more aware of how to use the wastewater system responsibly. So I was here last June telling you a little bit about the concepts behind some of the designs. So I will start off with a quick recap today for anyone who wasn't there at that time. The Madison Public Market is kind of positioned to be an indoor farmers market, business incubator, thriving community hub, place for people to gather and for our community to thrive. It's physically in a building which was the former Fleet Services building for the city of Madison on the corner of First Street and Johnson Street. This area is becoming increasingly more accessible. You can see some of the statistics here showing the access that is available through many modes of transportation to this site. In addition to being a very accessible location, it's also a place where many people are going to be gathering. So this is a great opportunity for taking our messages here that we give out on tours or through community interactions, outreach and education, into a place where people are already meeting, where they're already at. And the site is, interestingly, as I gave in the presentation last year, historically significant for the district, the site of the first wastewater treatment plant in Madison, and it's also adjacent to critical infrastructure pumping station number 1, for example. The bathrooms themselves, there's 7 stalls on each floor. There's 2 floors, so 14 unique single stall rooms, and each has received a unique design with different themes and educational elements. On the first floor, the theme is "Where Will You Go?" So it's sort of a choose-your-own adventure that really explores the hidden world of wastewater. There are topics that explore how the treatment plant functions, some of the science that's used here, and it's really meant to raise awareness and appreciation for this wastewater system, sewer system, and our treatment plant. Upstairs, you're welcomed to the CAN, and these bathrooms really focus on individual actions, so you can work with us, you can save water, you can be salt-wise, et cetera. Don't worry about reading this chart, but I wanted to put it on here because the concept for bringing these bathrooms to life is really based on science. And the terminology we have in social science is salience. Bathrooms are the place where water is visible, where you're thinking about already flushing the toilet or washing your hands. So it makes sense as a place to bring up, where does that water go? Our brains are constantly taking in so much information. We have over 180 biases going on at any one time. So our brains tend to take shortcuts, and salience is talking about ways to cut through some of those biases so that new information is actually, it sticks. So we can do that through things like novelty, emotion, connection, and we are doing that in the designs. So this is a rendering of some wallpaper that's going to be in there. It might look familiar to you. It's talking about our digesters and the importance of resource recovery and that critical service that we provide here at the wastewater treatment plant. But it's addressed through novelty, humor, and interactivity. So it's a memorable experience that might actually have a better chance of sticking than if we just tell people something. This, I'm not sure if the video will play, but, oh, here we go, is an example of how interactivity is coming into the design. So for folks who've been around a while at the plant, you might recognize this model. It was designed in the 90s, and we've had local tinkerers working on it to bring it back to life with some new technologies that are interactive. So when a visitor approaches, the series of lights will go through the actual treatment plant process, and you can see step by step what's happening here. Oh, I'm gonna play. An example of fun and novelty, interactivity. In addition to creating that space where our messages can stick, we're very careful in designing these spaces so that the messaging itself is done in a way that's founded in science. So each room will have text on the back of the door. You can see that on the right-hand side here. The text was crafted in such a way, in this example, that we're utilizing normative messaging. A lot of research has shown that when the way that you say something is really important. So this is addressing our toilets are not trash cans initiative. And so with normative messaging, what you're doing is showing that the right behavior is not flushing in this case. In this case, putting things in the garbage. It's so easy for us to sometimes frame problems as, oh, this problem's so big, everyone's doing it. Yet science has shown that if we use that kind of messaging, what happens is the social sense making, people will say, oh, I'm just like everyone else. If everyone's doing it, it must be okay, I'm just like everyone. So this is an example of how we really flip that message to what we know as the true reality, which is that most people are doing the right thing. We know that information alone doesn't equal action, so we used a number of different behavior change models in our work as pollution prevention specialists. This is a really simplified model that posits capability, motivation, and opportunity lead to a behavior. So sticking on the theme of toilets are not trash cans, I'll walk you through this model really quickly here. Opportunity, if someone needs to put materials in the bathroom in somewhere, they need to have a garbage can to do that, right? So that's opportunity. Luckily, the city of Madison built garbage cans into the stall, so it's part of the physical infrastructure there. However, that only addresses one piece of this model, the opportunity piece. If you're not someone who is in a women's restroom very often, you might not even know what this is or recognize it as a garbage can. So that kind of gets into the capability and motivation. How do we go to the next level and make sure that people actually are aware that there's a garbage can and that they recognize it and that they're going to use it? So we've put something in each room that is very clearly recognized as a garbage can so people can use it. Now, there's also been lots of research onto different aversions that folks have to using different kinds of garbage cans. So this one was selected because of it addresses that capability piece. So people's actually willingness to use that garbage can. And then getting into motivation, smiley faces are actually a surprisingly powerful motivator. And so there'll be some other little surprises that give people a little pat on the back or dopamine hit when they do the right thing, which is using the garbage can. So this is kind of just a small example, just to illuminate for you how social science has informed design of these spaces. There's lots more to see, and I hope that you all will come visit. Information has been shared out in email, and if you have any questions about that, please feel free to find me or contact Amanda Wegner, the district's communications manager, who has all the logistics on that. But beyond the really cool thing about this project is that it's not just a one and done. It is a launching point to really sustain our partnership with the Madison Public Market. We're in at the ground level working with them, and they've indicated that they would like to incorporate these bathrooms and the ideas here related to wastewater and our messaging, pollution prevention into year-round programming. They're already having lots and lots of tours of people coming in and seeing the market, and the bathrooms are one of their very first stops. So beyond tours, they definitely have signaled that there's lots of opportunities coming up for inclusion in events and other things that might be going on at the market as that develops. So with that, again, I'll just underscore that I hope that you all will be able to see these in person for our preview. The public market, we're still awaiting the grand opening date and details on that, but they have been gracious enough to open their doors for a special preview for our commissioners, staff, and partners who've helped with this project.
Oh, I was gonna ask when the grand opening date was. I take it we don't have one quite yet, but it's coming soon.
Okay, do they still play Pac-Man? Like that? Do you? So, I mean, like a 10-year-old would know what that is? They wouldn't know what a phone looks like, or a can opener.
The other just comment or question I had was one thing said what not to do. Don't flush toys in wipes and Kleenex because that's bad. But yet we all know that there are wipes being sold everywhere that say they're flushable. And so are there any wipes that are they flushable? Yeah, you can flush them, but
yeah,
they're not going to break down by the time they get here.
Correct.
So is there a way that provide message that flush it down the toilet? It's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's definitely part of what we're incorporating into the messaging in these spaces.
And I guess the issue that I have is that you get a lot of people out there that are buying flushable wipes. When it says on the package that they're flushable, they're perfectly flushable. It's how do you educate the masses to say that it's even that is what's being said on the package, it ain't a good idea.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a diversion from the bathroom specific project, but
place to start.
There are a number of different activities happening at the national level and at the state level. International flushability standards are being developed. There has been legislation that the district has been, to my knowledge, part of advocating on behalf of the WIPES Act, WIIPES Act, that's creating some labeling standards. And like I said, the international flushability standards are constantly evolving. So I think the national landscape and international landscape on this is probably going to be changing soon. Yeah. And the district is tracking with those from what I know. Anything to add with that?
Thank you. So that will take us to the executive director reports. Any update? You have one?
Yep, so Eric Dundee, Executive Director. The, two items in your packet, one is specifically under the Executive Director report is a, memo to the commission for the, commission reporting schedule. Realizing, we as staff have put together a calendar for the KPI reporting for strategic plan, but then incorporating all the other reporting that we do, wanted to give you a heads up and put this memo together. Amanda Wegner, Communications and Public Affairs Manager, helped put this together so that you can see it and then we can present it and receive your comments on it at the next meeting. So in general, this is just looking at a yearly review of how we would be reporting based on some of the KPIs are only going to have yearly touch points based on the information, but then other ones are incorporated into our what we would call our normal commission business. So that's one note. And then the second one that is not directly in the executive director report is the first quarter bills charge.
Okay. So, Todd, anything? Todd's nothing to add on that. Okay, so we'll go to the capital project update.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Lisa Coleman. I'm the engineering manager, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the capital projects update this morning. Fortunately, no Pac-Man in this presentation, so. Okay, so just a preview of what I'm going to talk about a little bit here. So these are all projects in the 2026 CAP. As usual, I'm going to go through the projects that are either in planning, in design, or in construction. Then we'll talk a little bit about projects completed this year and bids received so far this year. And then I will have a couple of project highlights. And as you know, I like to talk about the pictures on the slides because, you know, that's the most interesting part. So what we're seeing in this picture is the new louver fence at Pump Station 17 that surrounds the new valve vault that accesses the new force main that is connected. All right. So starting with planning, and so here you can see, as usual, the projects with the stoplight colors. So first, at the treatment plant, we have the laboratory remodel. The space needs part of that is complete, the space needs study, and there's a conceptual layout that's selected, all within the current lab footprint. Next steps will be to put out an RFP for design, which we expect to do late this year or early next year. One really critical thing for that project is going to be how do we keep the lab operating while we do the project? So that's going to be a significant challenge. So that's what the picture of the slide is, just starting to think through, phasing and that kind of stuff. It's going to be like, I think of those, dating myself, but those puzzle games where you slide the numbers around and, you mess up the numbers you already have in order to move the other one around. So it's going to be a challenging process. Okay. On to the next project at the plant, which is the biosolids facility plan. So I will have a brief update on that here in a few slides, so I won't talk more about that here. On to interceptor projects. So the first one listed is the manhole rehabs on the Old West Interceptor. That is, a big chunk of that is sort of coordinating with some City of Madison projects. The biggest one is the Regent Street reconstruction, which is expected next year, so we're starting to work with the city on coordinating on that. Then the second project listed under interceptors is a McFarland project that we're not started on yet. That's why it's gray. Pumping stations and force mains. Pumping station in 11 and 12 surge valve access platform. For that, we're currently working on a design RFP for a consultant. We're a little behind schedule, so that's why that one is yellow. The last project listed is a new project, and I won't go into this since we've talked a lot about force mains already. Theron was here last month, Theron Jacobson, and talked about this new project addition. So I think he provided you guys an update on that. So that's a new project that was added into the budget following approval of the budget in the fall. Okay, so next up is design projects. Again, stoplight colors there, indicative of how it's going. So at the treatment plant, we have liquid processing phase 2, which, as you know, is a very large project at the plant. We are close to 100% design for that. We expect to put that out for bid in early June. And then we expect to be back here at Commission to award that on July 30th. Second, we have dryer and seating modifications. Earlier this month, it might have been last month actually, you might recall approving an item on modifying the scope of that project a bit. So showing that as yellow, that's project is the scoping piece of it has taken a little bit longer. So that's why that one's yellow. On to interceptors. The first is a lining project that's just upstream of Pumping Station 7 in Monona. The second is related to some work along South Highway 51 at the Yahara River in McFarland. So that's in conjunction with a DOT project. Basically, we have to move some of our facilities out of the way as part of their project. So that will bid with the DOT's work, which will bid in early June. The third of those, the Northeast Interceptor Truax Extension Rehab, that's what the slide, the picture on the slide is showing. That's a project over near the airport that we're working on. You can see the runways in the picture to kind of orient you to where that is. But you recently saw a commission item for this, one for professional services related to traffic control. So that project, there's going to be extensive coordination and traffic control as we will be into Stoughton Road and also East Washington Avenue. So you can see on the picture on the slide is the yellow is the pipes that we are planning to line, just to kind of orient you what that project is. So again, with those lining projects, we don't need to dig up the pipe itself, but we do need to dig up access points, basically. So it's not as disruptive as putting in a new pipe, but it's still somewhat disruptive. So the next two projects listed there for interceptors are the Nine Springs Valley projects. So phase 1 is just upstream of Pumping Station 11, just south of the plant here. And then phase 2 is along Highway 151, upstream of Pumping Station 12, so in Fitchburg and Verona. Phase 1 I'm showing is yellow. We are still working on the route alignment work there, and the easements are proving challenging. The latest challenge with the alignment is that we're grappling with a site with contaminated soils along the alignment, so we'll continue to work through that. Phase 2 is expected to bid this summer, showing that as yellow as we're a little behind schedule getting those plans completed. I also am expecting we'll see higher bids on that one because there's some unique kind of constructability challenges with that really tight corridor along Highway 151 and the bike path and the unique soil conditions there. So that one I'm showing as yellow too. The last one listed under interceptors is actually two projects along the West Interceptor near University Avenue and the UW campus. We've talked previously about how we're kind of putting that one on hold to instead work on the Pump Station 2 Force Main new project that was added. The last project listed on the slide is the Pump Station 2 variable frequency drive replacements. For that, we now have a consultant on board. We're currently working on finalizing their contract, and we expect to have construction plans ready to bid in November or December. All right. So here's a map with ongoing current construction projects. So you'll see at the treatment plant, there's 4 projects stacked right on top of each other there in blue. For interceptors, there's just one ongoing, which is the Lower Badger Mill Creek Interceptor Phase 6, shown in purple over to the west. Whoops, not really purple, a little formatting error there. Show the far west, yep, over way to the far west, that's that one. Over in Verona, that's that one. And then the green ones are pumping station and force main related projects. So the smaller green dots are all one project. Those are the pumping station bar screen projects. So those are at pumping station 2, 7, 8, and 11. the green dot way down to the far left is the, Pumping Station 17 project in Verona. The one right in the middle of the isthmus is the, Crosstown Force Main, project that we're working on. And then the one furthest to the east, up at the east end of Lake Mendota is the pumping station, stuff related to Pumping Station 10. So those are kind of the ongoing construction projects. So a little more details on those. So at the treatment plant, we have the W4 project underway. That one I'm showing is yellow construction. We have a contractor on board. We've gotten submittals approved, all that kind of stuff. But the actual startup of construction has taken a little longer than we hoped. As we've seen again on those equipment-heavy projects, it's still, procurement of equipment is still, taking a while to get stuff on site. The Lagoon Dikes Improvements Project, that we held a pre-construction meeting yesterday, actually. So construction on that, we expect to start likely in May, and it should be complete, substantially complete, at least in August. So a relatively short window on that one. That one, if you recall, is a sheet pile wall along the southern berm of Lagoon 2. There'll be a follow-up project next year of the remainder of the berms around Lagoon 2, but simpler, basically just, fill rather than a sheet pile wall. So, let's see. Next project listed is the Nine Springs Electrical Service Equipment Replacement Project. I'll have a quick project highlight on that in a couple of slides, so I won't talk more on that here. For the sludge thickeners, that work is underway. We expect that to be complete in mid-June. For interceptors, as I mentioned, the only ongoing project is Lower Badger Mill Creek Interceptor Phase 6. So for that, the pipe work is expected to start up again. They had shut down over the winter, but the pipe work is expected to start up again and cross Midtown Road next week, I believe. And then we're expecting substantial completion in early June. And then down to the bottom of the slide, pumping stations and force mains. So Jen talked already about the Pumping Station 10 force main repairs, force main assessment, the valve work part of that, and the repair of the leak in the wall. The valves are arriving, we expect, in early May, and the work will begin, and then the force main condition stuff can happen after that. Excuse me. Pumping station bar screens. We have a contractor on board working through submittals, and we expect construction at those stations to start later in the summer. The Crosstown Force Main Air Release Valve Saddle Tap replacement is ongoing. That's on schedule to be completed this quarter. And last but not least, Pumping Station 17 in Verona is ongoing and making good progress. And that's what you see in the picture on the slide. That's inside. You can see the gray pumps standing vertically at this station because we have kind of limited space at this station. And then there's in the foreground, you can see a blue check valve. What those do is basically keep flow from going the wrong way in the pipe exiting the pumps. All right. So on to perhaps our favorite category, which is projects that are completed to date this year. And remember, italics means it's kind of newly added to the list. So I'm happy to report at the treatment plant that the flow splitter rehab project is complete. That was the pile of dirt that you used to be able to see right out the window here. So that's all put back together again and in service. You can see on the slide, the upper right picture is not an art gallery. It looks like an art gallery, but it is actually the inside of the flow splitter while it was being coated, so kind of a unique structure. The coating was completed over the winter, so they had to put kind of a greenhouse over the structure, which is what you see on the lower left, so that the temperatures were, sufficient for the coatings. The before picture is kind of in the middle, so you can see, degraded concrete and the coating peeling off, all that stuff. So all that is fixed now, so that is great to get that part of the plant back in service again. All right, and then the second project listed, Southeast Interceptor Rehab on US Highway 51, Phase 1. That was DOT's project, and part of it was DOT and part of it was us separately doing a lining project. You saw that come through commission for final acceptance in March. And then, last one listed there is pumping stations and force mains. So again, the pumping station 17 force main relief phase 2 also had final acceptance in March. I didn't put on the slide a couple of projects that were substantially complete in the fall, which is the Northeast Interceptor Wanakee and the West Interceptor Shorewood Relief Phase 3. We'll add those back on again when they get to final completion, hopefully shortly here, once they get the punch list for those projects complete. Okay. So bids so far this year, the first two projects that we bid so far this year, not including all the, kind of smaller maintenance type projects. There's been a bunch of those as well, but the big CIP projects are listed here. So one is the Lagoon Dike Improvements Phase 1, which, as I noted, is starting up shortly here. And then the second is the Pumping Station Bar Screens project, which is at 4 different pumping stations. And next time I do one of these updates should be, I believe it's scheduled on July 30th. So we should at that time have the bids for liquid processing phase 2. So that should be a very interesting update to provide. All right. On to a couple of project highlights. So first, the biosolids facility plan. So this project is being planned by our planning department, so I'm not involved in every little detail, but I'm going to just give you an overview here. You've heard Eric, our executive director, talk about the big 3, which are, 3 major projects on the horizon at the plant. This is one of those projects. The goal is to look at alternatives for managing our biosolids. So there's sort of a lot of words to the left on the slide. I don't expect you to read that, but it's just kind of shows the process of workshops and technical memoranda that we go through for a project of this nature. So as far as status, we signed the professional services contract back in about a year ago, April of 25. We're nearing completion now, expecting a draft plan in August. And then we expect to finalize and have a public hearing this fall. One thing to note, as we've been working on this, it's become clear that there's a lot of synergy between this project and the heat and power related improvements. So we are proceeding with some additional scope to evaluate those 2 projects together and look at how they should proceed, order of various things needing to happen, things of that nature. We think there's ways to combine components of those projects to make construction easier and potentially save some money. So we're looking at that. So what are our major conclusions and decisions so far during this facility planning process? So the first is that projects related to our solids process are going to be capital investment intensive no matter what we do, even if we just essentially keep doing what we're doing. The picture at the top of the slide gives you an idea, excuse me, of the parts of the plant involved with our biosolids related processes. You can see it's a lot of areas of the plant that are involved here, a lot of processes, a lot of related infrastructure. I talked about the second bullet item a little bit already. We think taking this step to look at biosolids and heat and power together and how that should unfold could make sense and potentially reduce costs. So having the facility plan take a little bit longer now is going to be time well spent for us. The third bullet is one of our sort of major conclusions and decisions so far. So we've concluded it makes sense to continue our land application program rather than move to a dried product, but to move from Class B liquid to Class A liquid. So what this means for the chemists in the room, of which I am not one, is adding a proprietary process after digestion called LISTEC, which is a thermal chemical hydrolysis process. And the result of that is liquid with a higher solids content. So we end up with an agricultural fertilizer that has improved characteristics over compared to our current Class B MetroGrow product, which the win for us then is that it helps relieve some of the pressure on storage, some of the pressure on hauling and application that we currently have. So another key conclusion is we don't think it's warranted at this time to make a more extreme change to our processes such as drying or advanced treatment. So we're barely scratching the surface here of what I'm telling you with regard to the biosolids facility plan, but I wanted to give you kind of some of the big things so far. Once we get to the end, we will do similar to what we did for heat and power, which is give you a whole presentation on just this facility plan. I think the way we did it for heat and power, we'll do kind of an informational presentation, then we send it to the DNR, and then when they approve it, then I think it comes back again to get approved. So that is where that one is at.
Can I ask a question on the biosolids?
Sure.
Are you guys doing cost-benefit analysis
Yes.
on all of this? So like the cost of building a new storage tank versus moving to the Class A or?
Yes.
what
That
other-
is a major part of a facility plan, is looking at the cost. Yep.
And are we gonna get to a point by the time we have the next presentation that you're too far down the stream to get commission input on some of the decisions that are being made?
Well, we'll probably be nearly complete at that time, so
Will be.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Eric Dundee, Executive Director, the decision point for the commission will be to, once we get our final approval on where we're going for alternatives, that'll be the commission's, point. We will have done nothing but doing a review of the options with that facility plan and then having, what our recommendation would be.
All right. And then last but not least, I want to touch quickly on one of the projects under construction at the plant that's in full swing right now. So that's replacing the major equipment feeding electricity to the plant. So that we started, we executed the construction contract back in summer of 2024, and then that major electrical equipment had very long lead times. Then last summer and fall, we built a small building to house that electrical equipment. You can see just a corner of that building in the picture to the right there. And I'm happy to report that all the major electrical equipment is now on site. So you can see in the top picture, the switch gear, and that fills up most of that new building. The other picture shows, down at the bottom left, shows the two old transformers, and in the picture there, you can see one of them is getting removed. So those are getting switched out, one at a time. This, as you can imagine, this project involves a lot of coordination internally, with our plant and processes, and also with MG&E and the substation. They're doing some related work at the substation. So, you know, we need to keep the juice flowing the whole time while we're replacing all this major equipment. So there's a lot of coordination happening as we go with this project, but it's going well. And we're expecting all the equipment to be in service first quarter next year, with completion in the middle of next year. I believe that is all I have.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Patrick?
Two quick, Commissioner Lytle was at a meeting last week where they were talking about, some of the positive things that have happened with PFAS and some, waivers or community that municipal organizations are getting, with that regulation in Wisconsin. But at the same time, wondering if there might be a point in the future where land application of biosolids, even if we've done all the front-end work to demonstrate that they're within all the limits, there might be less demand for that in the marketplace. And, people just trying to be risk-averse would, as part of our biosolids planning, a scenario in which we have a lot fewer takers for that material, just because of the perceived risk, whether it's legitimate or not. I'm assuming our consultants and our staff are considering, what happens if there's a future where, a lot fewer people are willing to do land application of biosolids.
Yeah, that's one of the major, that's one of the things that's being looked at as part of that facilities plan, is what if, emerging contaminants, those sort of things, PFAS, like what are the impacts on our program of those, and, what would we need to do if we were going to pivot, those kind of things, what costs are involved with doing that, what kind of processes would be involved, what kind of infrastructure would that take, all that kind of stuff.
Great. And then a little more targeted question, your summary spreadsheet you included, for construction projects mentions Lower Batchel Creek Interceptor in construction, but whatever you can discuss in an open meeting in terms of ongoing legal as a comment for that project.
Ongoing legal is what I will say.
More,
Vanessa can answer whatever she thinks is appropriate, but.
this is more related to contractual legal versus, you know, landowners and other entities, or,
They're all related to easements, so I think I'll leave it at that.
fair enough.
That's the ongoing cases are related to easements.
That was,
Well, as far as construction progress, it doesn't have an impact. So we build the project, and then, you know, we proceed with our legal thing on a separate track. So it doesn't stop us right now.
I can give a quick update on that. Vanessa Wishart, Legal Counsel. I was going to do this as part of my legal review. We are in the litigation process on those condemnation cases. I think that's what you're referring to there. And like Lisa said, that doesn't stop the project from moving forward. The question is really compensation as part of the condemnation process for those property owners. We're in active litigation. There's discovery going on right now. The trials on those cases have been scheduled for this summer.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. That takes us to Ezra. Any performance subcommittee update?
Just real quick on this, Commissioner Meyer here. I will say we, since the last commission meeting, we met with MGT, our consultant on the performance review process for the executive director, once, and then we've got a meeting scheduled for the 11th, I think. Cassie's nodding, yep, so the 11th. And so we're just processing through their 360-degree review, questionnaires, evaluations, and other aspects of that process. So we'll bring it back here when we're ready, which I don't even want to hazard a guess, but soonish. We're definitely making progress, yep. Yeah. Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay, Greg, anything for finance?
Our next meeting is canceled.
Next meeting. Okay, so it'll be a while. Okay, operations report. Alan?
Thank you, Commissioner Hubble. Good morning, Commissioners. Alan Grooms, Director of Operations and Maintenance. I'll be presenting the March operations report. So, looking at what we have for performance dashboards, it's pretty routine stuff, right in the historical ranges, as indicated by that shaded area. Suspended solids numbers, 3.7, very good. Well below the 16 milligram per liter limit. CBOD 5 number, 2.6 milligrams per liter. So again, very good performance. We typically get pretty good performance in the wintertime on a lot of these parameters. Ammonia sometimes suffers a little bit because of the cold impacts those organisms, but 0.33 is right, for ammonia is right in line with historical norms. Recall, looking at the phosphorus, we're right down the middle of that with 0.24. That is a reminder that we're presenting that now to the Commission as a the 6-month average that would go into our reporting form. That's the 6 months, in this case, from November through March. That 6-month period will totally encompass through the end of April. So we got one more month in there. So the 0.24 is actually a higher, I know the actual value for the month of March was on the order of about 0.18 milligram per liter. So that value is coming down with better performance. But the permit is actually the average. And so we discussed this back in December that we'd like to present that specific average number so that reflects more accurately what we are putting into our permit compliance. And then we started disinfection season in 1st of March. Numbers not 0.18, that is 1.8, most probable number per 100 milliliters, and so that is well below our well below our number and near the bottom of our historical average, and that kind of reflects the new season. Everything's starting out with not brand new, but everything's cleaned up and tuned up and ready to go. So, any questions on the March performance metrics? Oh boy.
It's probably a simple question, but you've been reporting fecal coliforms. Are you going to switch that to E. coli, consistent with our permit?
Yes, the question is whether we'll be switching to E. coli with the new permit, and that will be a change will take effect with the May 1, as Marty indicated. So we got another month that we'll be performing with the fecal. We did some testing last year with the E. coli just for the lab to run the kinks out and make sure that we didn't see any problems with that. So the laboratory is ready to go with that. So.
I was going to ask about chloride and all the other things in the permit, and if you'll update those for the May report in June. I'm guessing everything will reflect the new permit, right?
Yes, we'll be updating for the new permit. I thought about talking about the differences, but it really, we've still got another month that we'll report to the commission on the existing permit. So I sometimes get a little ahead of myself. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so. And then we do a quarterly update on just resource recovery and metrics as we go through. So that's this will reflect first quarter, January through March. Clean water, biogas production, reused effluent, all tracking right in line with our historical numbers. With on pace to be around where we've been averaging for those. Clean water, as we know, we had a fairly wet April. That number you'll see that tick up somewhat, although the flows did not come up near as much as you might have expected. So, but those numbers will come up, reflect that. The clean water is reflecting what we're returning to the environment, and the reused effluent is what we call W4 in plant. That's basically effluent that we're reclaiming and using it for suitable for purpose water for things like polymer makedown and things like that. Wash downs, but where we don't need actual potable drinking water for that. So, any questions on this dashboard? Got one more for you. Looking at Metrogo cake, we did make some cake earlier this year with the centrifuge production. We are in the process of doing some polymer trialing in that, so we'll probably make an incidental amount of cake through the rest of the year, but 275 estimated cubic yards through March. That number is probably going to stay fairly stable, similar to what we did in 2024. Struvite production, just under 120 tons through the end of March. Those are tons that have shipped and left the state. Not necessarily tons produced. That is a much more variable and hard to nail down number. So we basically report out to the DNR as well as the commission what we've actually shipped off site and has gone somewhere else for beneficial reuse. And then the Metrogo production, that represents what we have estimated to have sent to the Metrogo tanks. So 10 million gallons a quarter of the way through the year, so we're tracking right on pace. So any questions on these dashboard metrics?
Oh, thank you, Alan.
All right, thank you.
NASA, regulatory.
Good morning, Commissioners. Vanessa Wishart, Legal Counsel for the District. Just a quick update on our legal services over the last month. So like I mentioned earlier, our litigation team has been working on the condemnation cases, again, scheduled for trial over the summer. So largely what the work has been over the last month is doing discovery on those cases in anticipation of those trials. I've also been working with the district on review of the reissued WPDES permit. We have a closed session to talk about that further and potential legal challenges to that permit during this meeting. And then just some kind of fairly standard contract review work for the district over the last month that members of our team have been working on. The other thing I will be working on with the district is, I mentioned this at the last meeting with the regulatory report, there is an economic impact analysis open for the PFAS groundwater rules. I got comments from district staff just yesterday, I believe, so I'll be working with the district on getting those submitted next week when those comments are due. And then lastly, we did just get a comment period open for an economic impact analysis on the new facility planning rules that DNR is working on. So I will probably also be working with staff on evaluating, comments to be submitted on that EIA as well in the coming month. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, the, future meeting schedules in the packet. Take a look at that. Let's see, closed session. The commission may convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85(1)(g), for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the commission who is rendering advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the commission with respect to WPDES permit number WI-002459-7-10-0 issued to the district. We have a motion to go into closed session.
Yeah, Murphy, I'll move that we go into closed session in accordance with, agenda item 6A as just read by President.
Motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by
Commissioner Freeze.
second by Commissioner Freeze. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bookland,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeze,
Aye.
Commissioner Hovell,
Aye.
Commissioner Longkella,
Aye.
Commissioner Lytle,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Pulse.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so we had a motion by Brad Murphy, second by Ezra Meyer, to move back into open session. Simply report that we discussed litigation strategies related to our WPDES permit. And we had a roll call vote. Oh, yeah, we had a roll call vote. Everybody was in agreement with moving back and open. Okay, so that's done. Any future agenda topics? So I think what we need is a session at some point on what levers we have for chloride and how that's going to impact, not just us, but then our customer communities and everyone else, upstream or downstream. Okay, any other business? And motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Clark, motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Clark, second by
Commissioner Freeze,
second by Commissioner Freeze. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody.